So it records it, then you can put it on YouTube. But you have to pay to stream it live. Okay, Maitreya is 2 people. Yeah. We got Mike and Maitreya.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo. Haribo, Maitreya. Guess who we have here?
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Haribo, Mike. Guess who we have here? Can you see?
No, I'm not going to guess.
We're sharing the screen here.
We
Hare
traveled
Krishna.
together.
Yeah, you were with Bhakti Sid. Did you go out with Devananda to do too as well?
Yes.
Nitai Navadvipa Chandra.
Haribo.
Brother Peaceful, Haribo.
Oh, Hare Krishna. Yeah.
Now you remember.
Yeah, his name is Devananda Pandit,
Before
but before he became peaceful. But yeah, he's helping build my retaining wall tonight.
Okay.
Rebuild. Fell down a little bit.
Nice
How are
to
you
see you.
doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Pretty good. It's pretty mild here in Pennsylvania. When I lived in Washington, oh, you live in Washington, right?
Yes.
I used to live in Walla Walla, Washington. And
Oh, yeah.
whenever they had a real mild day in the wintertime, they called it a Chinook. That's what the Indians called it, like a mild day above 60.
Interesting.
So it's like in the 60s today and tomorrow. We're just going to jump right in here. We're on the 16
Hi, Dr. Mike.
verse.
How are you?
I'm glad you both could jump in here. We've got a special guest too. Devananda Peaceful used to do live streaming from the New Vrindavan website. And that was there was not interactive though. I kind of like the interactive thing. Can you
So how
see
did you
the,
settle on, what is it, 40 minutes?
Oh, well, that's the limit, that when you have more than 2 people, Zoom cuts you off at 40 minutes.
I do a 2-hour call every day with a whole bunch of people on it.
Well, they must be paying for it then.
Oh, I see. That's limited of a free one. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess
if you have more than 2 people on you can do it for free for like hours. But if you have more than 2 people, you're limited to 40 minutes. That's how they get you.
Gotcha.
And there's other like perks, you can stream it on different, like the Bhakti Center, they stream their Zoom class on their YouTube channel, Bhakti Center YouTube. So everybody that's subscribed to that channel gets notified whenever they're live.
Okay, so Mitra must be paying for it. I never knew.
Yeah, the Bhakti Center is paying for that. They have to be, because otherwise you can't stream it.
Mhm.
But I think they do their class is about 45 minutes long, and that's 5 minutes over. So they must pay for it. It must be a premium account. It's not that much. But we're on text 16. Everybody can see the text.
Yeah. This is a good format. Yeah.
Mike, you have?
Yep. We're good.
All right.
So Devananda, do you guys by Peaceful or Devananda?
You can call me Devananda.
Okay.
His Facebook name is Denny Devananda Moreau, because he's from Canada. So maybe we'll just have, we'll trade, we take turns reading the Sanskrit, but since there's 4 of us here, maybe since you're new, you can read the Sanskrit, the synonyms and translation, and then we'll just go around the bend here. Okay.
Okay. Get closer here.
If you want to like maybe put down the guitar, you can get closer.
Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha, ubayora pitrishtuntas, Tvanayos Tattvadarshibhi. Na, never. Asata, of the non-existent. Vidyate, there is. Bhava, endurance. Na, never. Abhava, changing quality. Vidyate, there is. Sataha, of the eternal. Ubayo, of the two. Api, verily. Drishta, observed. Antaha, conclusion. Two, indeed. Anayo, of them. Tattva, of the truth. Darshibihi, by the seers.
Read the translation.
Translation. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that on the non-existent, there is the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both.
And Mike, can you read the first paragraph?
Sure. Purport. There is no endurance of the changing body. That the body is changing every moment by the actions and reactions of the different cells is admitted by modern medical science, and thus growth and old age are taking place in the body. But the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all changes of the body and the mind. That is the difference between matter and spirit. By nature, the body is ever changing and the soul is eternal. This conclusion is established by all classes of seers of the truth, both impersonalist and personalist. In the Vishnu Purana 2.12.38, it is stated that Vishnu and his abodes all have self-illumined spiritual existence. Jotim Shri Vishnurabhu Vavani Vishnu. The words existent and non-existent refer only to spirit and matter. That is the version of all seers of truth.
Maitreya, can you read the next paragraph?
Sure. This is the beginning of the instruction by the Lord to the living entities who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. Removal of ignorance involves the reestablishment of the eternal relationship between the worshiper and the worshipable, and the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself, the difference between oneself and the Supreme being understood as the relationship between the part and the whole. In the Vedanta Sutras, as well as in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme has been accepted as the origin of all emanations. Such emanations are experienced by superior and inferior natural sequences. The living entities belong to the superior nature, as it will be revealed in the 7th chapter. Although there is no difference between the energy and the energetic is accepted as the supreme, and the energy or nature is accepted as the subordinate. The living entities, therefore, are always subordinate to the Supreme Lord, as in the case of the master and the servant, or the teacher and the taught. Such clear knowledge is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance, and to drive away such ignorance, the Lord teaches the Bhagavad-gītā for the enlightenment of all living entities for all time.
So I just had a question. Since you are all more knowledgeable than I am, how is it that we can understand the Supreme by understanding ourself, by studying ourself?
That's a very good question. Srila Prabhupada gives the example that we're the same in quality. So if you take a drop of ocean water, you can understand all the chemical properties of the ocean itself. The difference being that whales can swim in the ocean and boats can sail on it, whereas a drop of water, obviously, because of it's different in quantity, it has a much different nature. So we're conscious, we feel pleasures and pains, we have desires, we have individuality. So Krishna, the Supreme Lord, has all those things. But because he's the Supreme, he can expand into unlimited numbers of living entities and unlimited other plenary expansions and create universes, etc., all things we can't do.
Well, we have a certain creative potency. That's why we have that mode of passion. But there are certain things a living entity can't do. Like, I think we're up to a certain amount of qualities. We're similar to Krishna. And then you have the demigods above that, and they have a certain more percentage of qualities. And then Krishna Narayan has a certain percentage of qualities, like, but then Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Swayam Bhagavan, he has 4 distinct qualities that are not available anywhere else. Like he can attract all living entities by the, playing on his flute, and, nobody can do that. I just like to say, sometimes I tell my wife, he has 16,000 wives because he's God and we're not, there's certain things that Krishna can do and we just can't. That's the difference between him, and he's always a predominator, whereas we are always predominated. Okay, I'll read the Sanskrit. Avinasi tatad vidi yena sarvam idam tatam vinasham aviyasyasya nakaschit kartamarti. Synonyms: avinasi, imperishable, too, but tat, that, vidi, know it, yena, by whom, sarvam, all of the body, idam, this, tatam, pervaded, vinasham, destruction, avyayasya, of the imperishable, asya, of it, nakashit, no one, kartum, to do, arati, is able. Translation: that which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. Devananda, can you read the first paragraph and the Sanskrit as well?
This verse more clearly explains the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body. Anyone can understand what is spread all over the body. It is consciousness. Everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasures of the body in part or as a whole. This spreading of consciousness is limited within one's own body. The pains and pleasures of one body are unknown to another. Therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of an individual soul, and the symptom of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. This soul is described as 1/10,000th part of the upper portion of the hair point in size. The Śikṣāṣtaka Upanishad confirms this. Balagra satta bhagasya satada kalpitasya cha bhagojivaha savigyeya sachanan chaya kalpate. When the upper point of a hair is divided into 100 parts, and again each of such parts is further divided into 100 parts, each such part is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul.
Do you want to read the next one, Mike?
Sure.
Similarly, start out with similarly. Top of the page.
I'm not sure what you mean with similarly.
Just go read it. Read the
Okay.
Sanskrit. Keshagra.
Yeah. Keshagra shata bhagasya satamsha sadarshtatmaka vasukshma svarupoyam sankyatito hi chitkana. There are innumerable particles of spiritual atoms which are measured as 1/10,000th of the upper portion of the hair.
Good.
Therefore, the individual particle of spirit soul is a spiritual atom smaller than the material atoms, and such atoms are innumerable. This very small spiritual spark is the basic principle of the material body, and the influence of such a spiritual spark is spread all over the body as the influence of the active principle of some medicine spreads throughout the body. This current of the spirit soul is felt all over the body as consciousness, and that is proof of the presence of the soul. Any layman can understand that the material body minus consciousness is a dead body, and this consciousness cannot be revived in the body by any means of material administration. Therefore, consciousness is not due to any amount of material combination, but to the spirit soul. In the Mundaka Upanishad 319, the measurement of atomic spirit soul is further explained.
Can you read the next one, Mike or Maitreya?
Yeah. Esha nur atma chetasa viditavyo jasmin prana panchadasam vishesha pranashchitam sarva utam prajanam yasmin vishuddhe vibhabatyet esha atma. The soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. This atomic soul is floating in the 5 kinds of air, prana, apana, vyana, samana, and udana. Is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. When the soul is purified from the contamination of the 5 kinds of material air, its spiritual influence is exhibited. The Hatha Yoga system is meant for controlling the 5 kinds of air encircling the pure soul by different kinds of sitting postures, not for any material profit, but for liberation of the minute soul from the entanglement of the material atmosphere. How much farther should I read?
Just read the next sentence here.
Okay, so the constitution of the atomic soul is admitted in all Vedic literatures, and it is also actually felt in the practical experience of any sane man. Only the insane man can think of this atomic soul as all-pervading Vishnu Tattva.
So, the influence of the atomic soul can be spread all over a particular body. According to the Mundaka Upanishad, the atomic soul is situated in the heart of every living entity. And because the measurement of the atomic soul is beyond the power of appreciation of the material scientists, some of them foolishly assert that there is no soul. The individual atomic soul is definitely there in the heart, along with the supersoul, and thus all the energies of bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body. The corpuscles, which carry the oxygen from the lungs, gather energy from the soul. When the soul passes away from this position, the activity of the blood generating fusion ceases. Medical science accepts the importance of the red corpuscles, but it cannot ascertain that the source of the energy is the soul. Medical science, however, does admit that the heart is the seat of all energies of the body. Such atomic particles of the spirit's whole are compared to the sunshine molecules. In the sunshine, there are innumerable radiant molecules. Similarly, the fragmental parts of the Supreme Lord are atomic sparks of the rays of the Supreme Lord, called by the name Prabha, or superior energy. So whether one follows Vedic knowledge or modern science, one cannot deny the existence of the spirit soul in the body, and the science of the soul is explicitly described in Bhagavad-gītā by the personality of God in himself.
I got 2 questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the first question is, the soul being spiritual, how can we apply a material measurement to the soul? 1/100th of the point of the hair divided into 100, and that part divided into 100 again. So we're applying a material measurement to a spiritual entity.
Very good question.
So how is that?
Does anybody know? All I know is that Krishna he's like, when he was in the heart of Maharaj Parikshit, it said he was the size of a thumb. So Krishna can be any size he wants. He's bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest. But I guess the individual soul situated in the heart is a definite size. So how do you answer that, Maitreya?
I've always understood that to be metaphorical or philosophical. Just like we can't see the mind, you can't see the soul. And the idea that it's as small as the tip of a 10,000th part of a hair means you don't even try to see it. You won't see it. It's not visible. And furthermore, you can't see the mind or intelligence or the ego, and the soul is even more subtle. So it's made of spiritual energy, which is more subtle than anything in our material conception. And furthermore, it's, even if you did try, it's explained as being so tiny that there's really no point. So our influence is our only, the whole thing, the material energy that we're riding on is actually the material energy doing everything. And we're simply a passenger. And the description of the size of the soul is to emphasize the point that we have no influence whatsoever in the material world. As the Christians say, man proposes, God disposes. So without the energies of Krishna doing everything for us, we're so tiny and so, you could say insignificant, that we practically don't exist. We're part of Krishna, and he's so wonderful that imbues us with the ability to have consciousness and to experience the experiences that we do. And that's my understanding.
Well, there it is definitely located within a particular part of the body, though. Just like the super soul, it's said that the super soul exists along with the soul in the heart of the living entity. So it is localized. Like Paramatma is a localized aspect of Krishna as the super soul, and so he's right there next to the soul, which is compared to two birds in the tree. One's the eating bird; he's enjoying the fruits of the bird, and then the other is the observing bird, the witness. And so that's Krishna, that's the Supreme Lord. But Prabhupada, it just reminded me of some of the arguments that Prabhupada used to make as far as like the origin of life, when he was talking to the scientists when he was walking along the Pacifica beach, and the life comes from life morning walks. And he would say, so you take a body, the body is supposedly dead, what the medical science would be called dead, a dead body, you just know, but all the chemicals are there. So why don't you take some more chemicals and re-inject them into the body, make him live again? You can't do that. So that means that there's something missing that the scientists cannot reconstruct. They can't.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Even the Turing test, which is supposed to identify an artificial intelligence that could fool another person into thinking that it's a person. So a materialist could say, well, that is consciousness. But even if you put a person under anesthesia, or if a person's in a coma so that they're not conscious, the cells of the body are still kept fresh by the presence of the soul. So when the soul leaves, every cell begins deteriorating. The
soul is there, and it's just covered temporarily.
Yes, and its presence and the presence of the super soul is keeping everything alive and fresh. As soon as they leave, everything begins to decompose.
Getting back to the measurement, also, there's a mathematical explanation, because it specifically mentions the point of a hair, and mathematically you can't measure a point. The moment you try to measure a point, there's a distance from one end of that. It's a surface, so a point really can't be measured. So that's another way of considering. You can't measure a point.
The tip of a hair. So
yeah, it's tip of hair, but also it says, I think it does. Oh, it doesn't say point. Anyway, but my next question was in regards to the localized aspect. That the soul here, Prabhupada is mentioning a few times about being in the heart. Now, one of our godbrothers last year had a heart transplant. He had a heart transplant. So
and a kidney transplant.
And a kidney transplant the same day. So the soul is in the heart, and that heart was taken out, and another heart was put in. So,
yeah, they asked Srila Prabhupada about that. He says the soul just enters the new heart, no problem.
Change apartment, yeah.
Now, there's been some very interesting research. The heart itself carries memories. And they've done some heart transplants where the person begins having memories of things that they never personally experienced.
From the other person, yeah.
Yeah, and there's also a relationship when you try something artistic, or even chanting japa. When you apply yourself to it, the heart and the mind and the brain, it all becomes involved, and it's a very sublime subject. Actually, there was a heart surgeon. There's an article in the Science of Self-Realization about a Canadian heart surgeon. After having so many patients die, he came to the conclusion that there's something that leaves when the body dies that has nothing to do with the physical elements in the body.
You mean the heart actually remembers what the soul was doing?
Yeah, there's
the heart's storing impressions.
They had a woman who was able to identify the person who murdered her, who murdered the person who was the previous owner of the heart that she got in her body. And following the evidence that she gave, they were able to actually find and convict the killer. And those memories weren't anything in her experience. It was given to her in the new heart.
That was, I don't know, the heart is a material thing, but the spiritual, like when you have a psychic can actually like put their hand on something and then remember or try to figure out where this person is. Maybe there's some kind of metaphysical way.
No, it can be fairly physical, just like the brain. The brain is a computer used by the mind.
Yeah.
And so it does store and encodes quite a bit of information.
Yeah.
So this just shows that the heart and the liver and even the gut biome, they're also encoding information.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, the soul is different from all the material information part. The computer may break down, but the soul doesn't need a computer. It's like in the Origins magazine. Do you remember, if you read that ag magazine in the 80s? Really excellent magazine. It was the only
one copy.
The only one copy. I love that magazine. And they were talking about how the whole idea of artificial intelligence, you can put a red light in front of a sensor, and then it can print out something that says, I see a red light. But that's not the same thing as the soul and consciousness is recognizing it. There is no, they always make all these, like, ever since, 1968, Stanley Kubrick's HAL, in 2001 Space Odyssey, the computer took over the ship. But that's, it doesn't have consciousness. You might go haywire and do all kinds of crazy things, but you cannot take a chip and put it in somebody's brain and make them live forever.
Artificial intelligence will become so subtle and sophisticated, you won't be able to tell the difference between a conscious being and a sophisticated artificial intelligence. That's the very definition of the Turing test.
Yeah, but even that, that there's limitations to that.
No doubt. All I'm saying is that we have imperfect senses and we can be illusioned. And so unless you're self-realized, you will be illusioned by a perfect AI. You won't be able to tell the difference.
Well, even nowadays, they make these videos, they're called deep fakes. Mm-hmm. They look exactly like the person that's talking, and they use it for propaganda, saying this person said like this, but it's actually not them talking. It's just like a fake of them talking. So artificial intelligence is like that. But I never really liked any kind of movie that had that premise of artificial intelligence, or like even, sometimes they get really affectionate with the so-called robot or android or something. They don't feel those emotions. A machine can't feel anything. The soul is the only thing, you can't break down human existence into a series of zeros and ones.
Actually, conditioned souls are really not that much different than an AI. The material energy is doing everything, and the soul is basically asleep, watching the show.
That's actually a good point, but they think they're in control. They think they're in control, just like they think they're the doer. But and it's just like I like the example of a bull that has a nose ring. You pull the bull one way, and then the bull thinks, oh, I think I'm going to go this way. And you pull the bull the other way, and then the bull decides, okay, well, now I'm going to go this way. Actually, the bull is being pulled by the rope. It's not the bull that's thinking, but everybody in the material world is thinking that they're in charge and that they're doing everything. That's the problem. I read a thing about democracy in the 10th canto. I used to be kind of a political activist back when I was in Maya in the early 2000s. And one thing just like got me out of it was Hridayananda Maharaj was talking about, I think in the 10th or 11th canto, that all these people that think they're for the people, by the people, of the people, the whole idea of democracy, they're not doing anything. It's the material modes that are actually causing them to act in a certain way. So it's just a complete farce. The whole idea of democracy is it's an illusion. But it's still better than an autocracy, which I hope that the United States doesn't turn into. But if you have like Krishna conscious devotees in a democratic republic, then maybe they'll elect people that are also Krishna conscious.
It requires so much work. That's the part that people forget. Like in the Vedic system, if you have a king like Maharaj Yudhisthira, who's Krishna conscious, so then indirectly Krishna is actually running everything. So we know Krishna is perfect and things will be done nicely. Right. But I was explaining to my son just this morning, so many systems like socialism and communism, they have this sublime sounding philosophy. But the problem is human beings are imperfect. And so as soon as they try to enact that, they all end up fighting with each other, and it ends up becoming a totalitarianism nightmare. It sounds so good on paper, but it just doesn't work. And so having it, Prabhupada said, if you can educate the electorate so that they can elect somebody who's Krishna conscious, but as we're seeing, that takes more work than we can practically conceive of. It's not impossible, of course, but we all have to become empowered.
If 1% of the population became Krishna conscious, it could change the world. But the fact that that we can actually, the saintly kings, there are no saintly kings, but and so 10th class men or 4th class men are electing 10th class men, but it's obviously a better system. And the way that it worked was you had the Kshatriyas, the administrative class were engaged by the Brahmanas, and the Kshatriyas were always listening to the Brahmanas. And so that's the way that it worked in Vedic society.
Yeah.
And you could also transplant that into democracy. You could have like some really smart people that are also spiritual, that have morals and values, and they're based on bona fide scripture. It's not a theocracy. Everybody always objects like mixing church and state, but how can you not mix church and state? Everything is Krishna. And if you think anything is separate from Krishna, you're immediately an illusion.
Well, remember in the Vedic times, there was one flag. There was an emperor. So, and it was a theocracy, but it was, the one religion that was Bhagavad Dharma. So it wasn't like my religion versus your religion. As Prabhupada said, gold is gold. So real religion is the same, no matter where it is, whatever its practice, it's always the same. But Kali Yuga makes everything difficult.
And
Yeah, well-
all the systems existed. All the systems of, for example, the principle of communism, the principle of capitalism, the principle of monarchy, all existed within that system.
Good point. Yeah.
The difference being was the consciousness that was directing the whole thing. It was God consciousness. And
Yeah, really good point. Yeah.
Working towards the same goal.
Even in all these different systems, democracy, if you put Krishna in the center, or communism, Prabhupada was to the left of Bernie Sanders. If you want to really look at it, Bernie Sanders says everything should be like a socialistic state, but Prabhupada was even more farther to the left of that. He said nothing belongs to the state. Everything is belonged to God, and actually nothing belongs to even the people, even our bodies, so that's spiritual communism.
Right.
That's the radical thing that Prabhupada tried to introduce in Russia. I was reading how he tried to talk to Dr. Kotovsky in Russia about that concept. It's a good concept, but if you put Krishna in the center, but otherwise, the capitalists and the communists will always be fighting with each other.
Yeah, Kotovsky is a good example of a Brahmin who became corrupt. The Krishna is Go Brahmana Hitayacha, but when the Brahmins are real Brahmins, then you can have something real. But when the Brahmins become corrupt, then it all goes to hell.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Krishna protects the Brahmanas. I was just reading the story of Shakshi Gopal. Krishna goes out of his way. When that one older Brahmana the younger Brahmana needed Shakshi Gopal to bear witness to the marriage ceremony, there was some conflict, and he walked across India. The deity did himself. Yeah. And so because he was so obliged to the Brahmanas, these are Brahmanas. And so Krishna is friends of the Brahmanas and the cows. It's a perfect Vedic system, So let's go to the next one here. Mike, you still there?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay. Text 18. Antavanta ime deha nityas yokta sarir ina anashino prames yasya tasmad yasva bharata. Anantavanta, perishable, ime, all these, deha, material bodies, nityasya, eternal in existence, ukta, are said, sarir ina, of the embodied soul, anashina, never to be destroyed, aparim esyasya, immeasurable, tasmat, therefore, yudvyasya, fight, bharata, a descendant of Bharat. Translation: the material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharat.
Now it says it's kind of a contradiction because it's immeasurable, but before they were explaining the measurements. Right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of a contradiction, but
we can measure it because it tells us, but if you were to try to go and measure the soul, how would you do it?
Well, yeah, it's invisible, it's indestructible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
There's not an app on your phone you can use to measure the soul.
Yeah, like you have those apps where you can measure like they have a measuring stick on iPhones now, you can measure from one point to another.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way. Even light is not really a point, and light is a wavicle.
Mhm.
It's a particle and a wave. And that's just still material, what to speak of beyond the idea of light is a soul.
Yeah.
I guess it's my turn. I'll read part of the purport here. We've got about 4 minutes left. Purport: the material body is perishable by nature. One may perish immediately, or it may do so after 100 years. It is a question of time only. There is no chance of maintaining it indefinitely, but the spirit soul is so minute that it cannot be seen by an enemy, to say nothing of being killed. As mentioned in the previous verse, it is so small that no one can have any idea how to measure its dimension. So from both viewpoints, there is no cause for lamentation, because the living entity as he is cannot be killed, nor can the material body be saved for any length of time or permanently protected. The minute particle of the whole spirit acquires this material body according to his work, and therefore observance of religious principles should be utilized. The Vedanta Sutras and the living entity is qualified as light because he is part and parcel of the supreme light. As sunlight maintains the entire universe, so the light of the soul maintains the material body. As soon as the spirit soul is out of the material body, the body begins to decompose, as you were saying, Maitreya. Therefore, it is spirit soul which maintains this body. The body itself is unimportant. Arjuna was advised to fight and not sacrifice the cause of religion for material bodily considerations. This reminds me of a poem. Actually, when I was in high school, I used to be a big fan of Emerson, even before I read any Prabhupada's books. But he wrote a poem called Brahma. And it's kind of like that one verse from the Bhagavad-gītā that's coming up here pretty soon. The soul is never slain; it cannot be slain. He never kills. And so the verse, the poem by Emerson is based on that verse, and it goes: "The red slayer thinks he's slain, or the slain thinks he is slain, but it knows not the subtle ways I keep and pass and turn again. Far or forgot to me is near, and one to me is shame and fame. But me, the meek lover of the good, find me and turn thy back on heaven." Pretty profound. It's actually in the third person, spoken as if Lord Brahma was speaking, but Brahma also is actually just the representative of Krishna. So he's saying, turn thy back on heaven, which means the material heaven, and find Krishna, find the real Brahman or whatever,
So he really was a transcendentalist.
He was.
Far out.
Yeah, I think that Emerson had a lot to do with my becoming a devotee. He's my Vartman Pratakshaka guru, and of course Prabhupada was ultimately, but I wrote a lot of things down in my diary. He said the only books worth reading are transcendental or extraordinary. And Śikṣāṣtaka Prabhu loved that, and he wrote it down when I gave him that quote, because he's awesome. A big book man, Anyway, it's time to go here. I want to thank you all, especially our new guest here, Devananda.
Hi, Devananda. So nice to see you again. How are you?
It's
bring back memories from the van.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember well certain things we had, and wow, this is like 30 years at least now.
Amazing, huh?
Years. Wow. But again, I was just thinking actually in regards to the whole discussions we have in here, those years, 35, it's relative. That's a relative element. So the body, the value of the human body is relative. The value of the soul is absolute.
Nice.
There was 3 figures that were given to me. The human body is worth about $4.50. From medical perspective, if you got good organs, $50 million is on the market. And if we analyze all the components, the elements, iron, magnesium, so on, about $1 a pound.
Ah.
So that's the value of the human body. So,
Anyway, thank you very much, everybody, for participating again, especially
Okay.
Mike. Mike is like here every single week.
Okay.
So kudos to you, Mike. And we'll see you next Friday, hopefully,
Okay.
if you can make it.